Before I begin, I wanted to mention the class I'm using for this gameplay video. I've got the Bulldog Face Hammer in free-for-all mode, and this was the class my 6-year-old son made for me, so I decided to use it. He's got Overcharged, Fast Hands, and Scavenger, as well as Exo Ping and the Tracking Drone. Certainly not a free-for-all friendly class at all. So a lot of people have asked for updates in regard to my daughter. Briefly, if you're new here, I have a 5-year-old daughter named Ellie. She was born with a condition called spina bifida myelomeningocele, and as a result, she has quite a bit of medical problems. Now with that said, this past Monday was one of the most chaotic days I've ever had in my entire life. And not in the good chaotic way either. So in May, my daughter had a huge operation on her back. Basically, her spinal cord became stuck due to scar tissue, and the procedure was supposed to unstick it. This ultimately would improve her ability to walk as a result. A week after surgery, her physical therapist said she noticed a huge improvement. However, the next 2 weeks, the therapist told us her walking was getting worse again. We had a 6-week post-operative appointment with the neurosurgeon scheduled, so we asked him at the appointment what he thought. And he told us that this has to be shunt related. Now without getting too medical or confusing, a shunt basically drains the cerebral spinal fluid from your brain. If you have too much CSF fluid in the brain, swelling results and you can actually die from it. In normal people, this happens automatically. However, with Ellie's condition, she has to have these shunts. So she actually has 2 of these. And when he told us it had to be shunt related, my wife and I sort of looked at each other and said, there's no way. We said this because symptoms of shunt failure, which my daughter has had 3 times already in her life, include nausea, vomiting, severe headaches, extreme tiredness, and irritability. And she wasn't experiencing any of these symptoms. However, the neurosurgeon said that sometimes in patients with Ellie's condition, typical shunt malfunction symptoms can be hidden or present in strange ways, such as having trouble walking. So he told us to monitor her for 2 weeks and call him at that point. So last Friday, my day off, I took my son Jack and Ellie to the store. And when we got home, I let him play in the front yard while I brought in the groceries. Ellie came in a few seconds later and claimed that Jack had shoved her down. I looked her over and saw a huge wound on the top of her foot. It looked like a severe case of road rash that one would get if you were to skid across the pavement. I asked her why she wasn't crying or didn't cry at all, and she said, it doesn't hurt. Now anyone aged 6 and under who had that big of a wound should have been screaming bloody murder. So later that night, my wife and I tested her sensation in her feet. It was no surprise that she couldn't feel anything on the leg with the wound. And no sensation seemed like a strange symptom. And she's never had that before, so we called the neurosurgeon. He told us we should get a CT scan of her head immediately. And cue this past Monday. As soon as the doctors got it, they compared it to a CT scan Ellie had when she was 2, which was immediately after her first shunt malfunction procedure. They look at the lateral ventricles in the brain. In a normal patient like you and I, the ventricles are very tiny and almost non-existent, which is how they looked on her CT scan from when she was 2. Monday's CT scan, however, showed them increasingly enlarged compared to that study. My wife got a call from the hospital that specifically said, come down immediately. She needs to have surgery ASAP. They said to go through the ER and they'll be waiting and take us straight into surgery. So naturally, we all freaked out. The travel time to that hospital is 3 hours away. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll probably remember me tweeting this out. So once there, we went straight through the ER. Except it wasn't as how they described it. We didn't just go in and have surgery right away. First, we had to deal with the ER nurses. We explained everything that had happened so far. Then, the ER doctor came in. Again, we had to explain what had happened. Then, the ER neurosurgeon came in. Again, we had to explain word for word what happened. I don't understand why anyone doesn't relay the information. So this doctor wanted to get what is called a shunt series. Basically, they x-ray her shunts. So we went to x-ray and we did that and then we came back. The x-ray again concluded that something was wrong with her shunts. Finally, at this point, I asked if we could just see our regular neurosurgeon. It turns out that he was on vacation. His replacement was a neurosurgeon on call. So instead, they sent us 2 residents, which are students, by the way. And once again, we had to explain what was going on with Ellie. Then they looked her over and they told us, and I quote, Ellie looks too good to chop open. A direct quote there, chop open. I don't think she worded that very nicely. And my wife was furious at this. She demanded to know why we were told immediately to come down ASAP for surgery only to be turned away by the on-call neurosurgeon. The residents told us that apparently there was a miscommunication. Somehow they were led to believe that Ellie had the bad CT scan in addition to vomiting and extreme tiredness. Now there's no way my wife would have mentioned either of those symptoms to anyone because Ellie didn't have any of those. So we have no idea how they assumed this, but it was false. They said that even though her ventricles were enlarged on the CT scan, since she wasn't showing any other symptoms of a shunt malfunction and looked pretty normal, they didn't want to operate today. They told us to wait for our neurosurgeon to come back from vacation, and then he'd decide whether or not to operate. So he comes back this Tuesday on the 28th of this month. I have no doubt in my mind he's going to be furious when he hears that Ellie didn't have surgery yet. In the meantime, if Ellie's ventricles become any larger, she'll be like a ticking time bomb. Shunt malfunctions are a very serious matter that you can die from in a relatively short period of time, which is one reason we wanted the surgery done right away. If she gets any worse between now and the 28th of this month, there's no way we could make it a 3-hour drive down there. We'd probably have to be flown in by the helicopter. So my wife and I had a few choice words with the residents who hesitantly concluded that we should be fine waiting until the 28th. It seemed like the on-call surgeon just didn't want to come in at 7 o'clock at night and do the surgery. So he deflected the case and told us to wait and made up a story that they assumed that she had symptoms that she doesn't. So now we've been keeping a close eye on Ellie. We've got an MRI scheduled this coming Monday, which she has to be sedated for, which is another thing to worry about. And then Tuesday we see the actual neurosurgeon. Unfortunately, I have a feeling she's going to require surgery this Tuesday, so we're preparing for another hospital stay. Needless to say, last Monday undoubtedly shaved at least 5 years off my life. So that's my update on my daughter so far. That's about all we know. While my wife and I have been a nervous wreck, at least she's been brave through it all. Please keep her in your thoughts for me.